Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bascome's Corner. Listen, we have a special guest, okay? A special guest, Dr. Tim Herzog. I told him I'll mess up his name. I'm hoping I get it right. And, Dr. Tim is a sports psychologist, and I cannot tell you enough with everybody watching on how important this is, right? Not just for professional athletes, but just for, parents in general, just in people who kind of are going through some times, right? Stressful times. But for athletes, I know this offhand, okay? I have mental breakdown many times when I was playing, especially trying to build my confidence. So what we're going to do is that this is going to be a two-part series, okay? Because there's so much awesome information. I want to get to learn about Doctor. I want to get a good understanding, okay, when we're looking at, the sports psychology. So we're actually going to be going through his career pathway, is going to explain to us, like, what does it take, right? What does it look like, okay, from his career pathway? Also going through, like, an overview of counseling and mental performance. The other thing I want him to share with us is that, and I know, like, the performance, right? We have a physical performance, but there's also a mental performance, and just kind of giving us some tools and some experiences and some things. And, I'm going to pull some other stuff out of him, right? But so let's welcome Tim, Dr. Tim Herzog. I greatly appreciate your time, and thanks to MedStar, okay, for getting us all set up. As we know, you're very, very busy. Went through your whole bio. You're doing so much, a lot. So I don't know where you find the time, but I appreciate everything you're doing. So welcome.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I want to jump right into it, right? I want to go through, Doctor. I want to go through a career, right? Let's start off as that, that career pathway. Like, what got you interested? What got you inspired, okay, for this journey of sports psychology?
So when you ask that, I instantly think of when I was 16 years old. My sport was always sailing, and it still is, even after a brief hiatus while I was focused on grad school and stuff. So at 16, I lived in the Boston area. I was about to drive up to Maine to go sail an event up there. And so I asked my coach, hey, can you help me throw my boat in the water so I can go practice tonight, and then help me load up at the end of the evening so I can, go drive 4 hours up to Maine? And he was like, no. I was like, what do you mean no? He's like, that's a stupid idea. And I'm like, what do you mean? Because my way was always just push harder and train more. And, that's how success came. And, he's like, it's the night before your event. You need to relax. He's like, and you have a long drive in front of you. Like, he's like, you know what you should do? Go home, read Inner Game of Tennis, and, and then sail your event. And I'm like, what? Inner Game of Tennis? What does that have to do with sailing? And so, I did skip practicing that night. I drove to Maine, I sailed, and eventually picked up a copy of that book, and it totally changed my perspective. Inner Game of Tennis, while they talk about sports psychology in the context of tennis, really it's applicable to anything. And, I started applying what I was learning in terms of the mental game to my own sport, recognizing, there are times when I am on fuego on the race course, and then there's times where I can't get out of my own way. And so I started to figure out how to be on top of my mental performance for greater consistency, and really became intrigued with it all. And so, that was kind of the launching point. Read a slew of other lay people books. And then, as I got rolling with college, and keep in mind too, right, I started coaching when I was 17 years old.
Wow.
And so as I was reading stuff, I was applying it directly to those who I was coaching. And then I got rolling with college with one of the top teams in the country. And, while I was at a school at St. Mary's College in Maryland, it didn't have sports psychology as a major or anything. I did study psychology, and every chance I had, I geared papers or whatever independent pursuits to dive into psychology. And I was applying what I was learning to myself. I was applying it to those who I was coaching in the summertime. And things just kept going from there.
No, that's awesome. You know what strikes me is that the young age, right? It's crazy because it's at 12 years old, 13, 14, I really got into the game of soccer. Okay. Mm-hmm. But that's a physical, right? I can see that physical kind of development. But we're talking about a mental state at 16, 17, 18, that mental state, that is very tough. And when I go through, and I was that young and going through soccer, I was easy putting that towards a passion and a love for, to do it. And to be on a mental side, you seeing like the outcome, right? You seeing the outcome at that age, it's amazing because you very rarely hear that, right? You very rarely hear that. It's always a physical, yes, I got this talent, I go, but to search for that, I never would have thought that the mental state of my performance would, have an effect on my growth. Never.
And it matters so much in terms of training and performance. Yeah.
So this is great. And this is why I wanted to really have you here, because this is a huge part with, and even the self-development, right? We have the physical side, but you also have the mental side, the social side. So with that, let's go if I'm like 16 going through high school, and let's say if I don't read a book, is there any courses or anything that if I have interest in this, right? I have some interest in this as a high school, young person. What's next? Like, are there courses in school, like even high school, that can kind of put me onto this career?
So, let me start by saying it's a long road, and maybe it doesn't need to be as long as I made it. And I can certainly speak to how to simplify it a little bit. I took about as long a road as one could imagine. That said, I think it helped me become pretty good at what I do. So, at the high school stage, one thing that I think is super cool that is a shift from when I was in high school is that you can often take a course in psychology. A lot of schools offer AP psychology. So there are chances to get your feet wet, with just the broader field of psychology. And that's a really good place to start. Sports psychology, or sport and performance psychology, it's a multidisciplinary field, right? And so, there's the sports science piece, and then there's the psychology piece. And so it's really a blend of the two. And so at the high school and then undergraduate levels, really just anything you can do to expose yourself to psychology and to expose yourself to sport, and the sooner you can get into coaching, I think the better. To take on those roles, even if it's coaching a peewee league, volunteer or whatever, to be in that role is to whether it's in an informed way, or hopefully as you're doing more and more reading and continuing education, right? Hopefully you can be applying research-based theories to the work that you're doing. I think one kind of streamlined way that you can start getting into it too is via something that I put together actually just recently during the pandemic, right? There's the website for it is www.reachingahead.thinkific.com.
Okay.
And it's a mental training platform, and it's self-paced. There's over 20 hours of video. There's worksheets, there's other activities, and I take you step by step through a training program. And it's a nice, affordable way to do it. So, I think if you have aspirations to someday be a sports psychologist or mental performance coach, and I can differentiate between the two in a little bit. If you have that aspiration, I think start by making yourself your own guinea pig, right? Learning everything you can, applying it to yourself, and seek out coaching opportunities.
Yeah, just listening to you, and I do a lot of stuff, Doctor, in reference with personality traits and how it affects our career, and how also it affects your leadership, right? And my question for you is that, and this is where I like to go off, because as you're talking, I kind of like to throw some things out. So let's say I go through these programs, I'm taking, and the first thing I'm hearing you said, hold up, get a feeling of who you are first, right? Just get a feeling of what, really make yourself that guinea pig, get to learn some things even about. So when I'm looking at some of those skills, right, before I even get to the class, but I have an interest of this, all right, I know now I got to get to college. I know I take these, psychology classes. What's some other skills that you feel like, as far as your personality, right? You have a dominant, influential, status compliant. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Find yourself in that status mindset, because it also calls for the ability to be able to engage and be confident. Because if I'm going to a counselor and a sports psychologist, and I'm looking for that comfort level to, trusting by default, how do you get and going through this, right? Does that play a part in it, and having these like skills as far as kind of being able to engage, or the personality traits that you may have to bring out to connect with others? Is that important?
So I have a few comments on that. One, I think it's important to differentiate between personality traits and skills, right?
Okay.
Personality tends to be a fixed thing, more or less. I mean, sure, our personalities can shift a little bit through the course of our lifespans. But skills are something that can always be developed. And so my reaching ahead mental performance model is very much centered on skills. Well, of course, I focus sometimes on personality too. You use the DISC. I happen to use the Myers-Briggs, two different instruments, but both bring a lot to the table. So, in terms of personalities, right? I mean, and as an individual athlete, doing the work with a sports psychologist or mental performance coach, I think regardless of your personality, it can maybe be a little bit daunting to seek somebody like me out. Like, whoa, who's this guy? Is he going to get in my head? Like, whoa, whether you admit it out loud or not, like, whoa, that's vulnerable territory. I got this covered, And it's so funny, right? That people have this mindset of like, well, I got this covered when it comes to the mental game. And yet, they're open to working with a coach on technique. They're open to working with strength and conditioning on getting stronger and faster. It's the way I view it, it's just coaching in a different domain. But, I have to acknowledge that, anytime we're talking about mental, emotional stuff, even if it's primarily a skills focus, that is vulnerable territory. And so, regardless of one's personality, I take pride in the fact that I think I make it safe enough. I take the stigma out of seeking out help, whether it's, help for development of skills or help for addressing problems. I think I do a pretty good job of taking the stigma out and making it feel like a normal conversation. And my clients guide the way. So I'm not going to make somebody talk about anything they don't want to talk about. I follow my client's lead, and it's a partnership. It's a collaboration.
No, that's great. I as we're talking about this career and the path, I want to talk about, I could not get all your credentials. Okay. I have a whole list of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I want
I could fill up that whole banner.
I want to kind of get an idea if you can help us out with the credentials and the different types, right? Because it was interesting, because I was listening to an interview that you had, and they introduced you as a licensed, psychologist, right? A licensed clinical psychologist. Mm-hmm. And then it was a licensed clinical, I'm actually reading of, professional counselor. And then he mentioned is that, oh yes, and you just received to be a sports psychologist. And when you came on, you said, "Oh no, it's all intertwined. It's all the same, right? It's nothing like it has the same pathway or lines." Could you?
It's confusing. Yeah.
Yeah. But could you help us out?
You bet.
Plus credentials, right? And you got all these letters. I mean, you got an ED. Just because I know.
Yeah. So let me break it down by degrees, licensures, and certifications.
Okay.
Right. And let me throw in the caveat too that, again, like I took the ultra long path, right? And I wouldn't necessarily recommend for everybody to, who wants to go down this path to necessarily go to the extreme distance that I did. So in terms of degrees, I'm actually looking up at my degrees right now on my wall. I've got a master's in counseling, specializing in sports psychology. I've got another master's in clinical psychology. So the first one is more about learning how to help people tackle problems, and specifically in the sports psychology domain, right? The second one is more about addressing significant problems. When things cross a threshold where it's really feeling like too much. And then I actually did 95% of a doctorate. Didn't finish in that particular program, but then did a whole nother doctorate in EDD, or Doctor of Education, in counseling psychology. And that was very much centered on learning intervention, learning not just how to diagnose problems and do assessment, which was very much the focus of my second master's, and that program that I did 95% of my degree with. But it's very much focused on, okay, so there are these given problems. How do I help? So that's a little bit about the degrees. I'll share real quick too about licensures and certifications. So I am a licensed clinical professional counselor. That's a master's level licensure to do, healthcare essentially. I'm licensed in Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Montana. And so I can work with people on addressing the more the bigger problems in those states. I'm also a licensed clinical psychologist in Virginia, and that's the doctoral level licensure. No need, I think, right now to dive into why I'm one in one state and others in other states. But in some respects, it doesn't matter, right? I have the qualifications I have. It's a license to be able to do that work in those states. Now, that said, I also have a few certifications. I'm certified by the Association for Applied Sports Psychology.
Wow.
As a certified mental performance consultant. So now that's the straight up, sport or performance psychology stuff where, this is about enhancing performance, not just solving problems. And then I'm also certified through the Biofeedback Certification International Alliance. Right. And so I do what's called biofeedback with people. You can see over my shoulder, right? I've got my biofeedback set up over there. Essentially, it's a way with fancy equipment and computers to see what's going on with your physiological stress response.
Wow. Okay.
Right. And learn how to influence it directly. So that's kind of a mouthful, but happy to follow up with anybody if they have.
Yeah. So just letting everybody know if it's qualified. Okay. It's qualified. Yeah. No, it was great because I
mean, you could do what I do to an extent with, a third or a quarter of my,
So let's go through. I want to share and I mean, greatly appreciate because some people really don't understand when they have interest in something, these pathways, right? Like what it looks like, what's the journey. So I really appreciate, and this is why we have to divide it into two parts. The other thing, next I really want to talk about is that the overview of counseling and mental performance, right? Just an overview. What are the different realms? Like what can you share when you're talking about counseling and mental performance right off the bat? I may get it, right? I may get a good understanding of that means, because I'll tell you what's very interesting. I'm going to be open up and tell you right now. When I was young and somebody says, because I went through so much abuse, I went through a lot, right? And somebody shared with me, you got to go to a counselor. The first thing I thought, I was such in a betrayal, denial. I never went past that denial because I felt like I'm crazy. Right? I didn't understand as a young person when I was going through all this abuse, how it was going to help me. So what I want to do is kind of bring, even when we have the young people on in our next part, is bringing some clarity, right? So there's a comfort level of knocking on your door or accepting that counseling, if it's it is a part of our mental, and especially, that mental performance on how we connect to things and how we feel about ourselves and the situations when confronted. So I just want to share that, because it's not just, I just want to talk to people and think it's just about athletes. Okay. And
Right.
I share that experience on how difficult. So if you can share, is that just different realms around when you're looking at counseling and mental performance?
Yeah. So, yeah. And thank you for sharing that. I think even in a context like this, right, that's vulnerable territory.
Yes.
But, and at the same time, like what a service what a gift that you're giving, all the folks who are watching this by sharing that you've had your own struggles. Right. I think you, David, you're one of the many athletes and coaches out there who are part of this wonderful trend right now, taking stigma out of the process for seeking out help.
Yeah.
We all have our struggles. It's part of being human. And, of course, some have more than others. And sometimes it's because of the environment. And sometimes we don't necessarily know why it is. But it is. And so we want to address it. I think when we're talking about counseling or psychotherapy, that end of the continuum of these kinds of services, right? When we're talking psychotherapy, often that's about addressing stuff like attachment and, the deeper reasons for why we feel the way we feel. And it's about deeper healing, and so, for instance, you mentioned the betrayal that you felt having been abused yourself. That's a significant thing that one needs to work through to be in a better place, to make sense of like, wait, how could this person that I love also do things, whether they intended to or not, that were really evil? Like, how can I love and in some respects hate the same person? To make sense of stuff like that is an important part of one's journey. Counseling, as opposed to psychotherapy, while there's certainly overlaps, tends to be still about solving problems, but maybe more here and now focused, right? And so, okay, I'm experiencing, for instance, this anxiety, regardless of wherever it came from, and how do I cope with it now? How do I tolerate it? How do I maybe turn it down a notch and manage it? So I'm depressed. How do I deal with it right here, right now? And that's what counseling is very much about. And then, mental performance coaching is really about building skills and about overcoming barriers directly associated with performance. And so, the simplest way I've come up with to break it down over the years, both for professionals in my field who are figuring it out and for, potential clients, is to say this, right? If we're doing psychotherapy or counseling, it's about improving mental health. And maybe as a byproduct, performance improves, right? It's pretty common to see that. Now, doing mental performance work, the goal is improved performance. And maybe as a byproduct, mental health improves, but that's not the goal.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's well, it makes perfect sense. And, the great thing about this is that I'm able to even listen when I'm listening to you. You're gonna feel like in a consult session now, right? Because I get to understand it, right? I get to understand now the difference between, because counseling, like you said, and it's the problem solving, and the mental performance, it's like, let's say, for instance,
it's proactive.
It's proactive, right? Yeah, it's kind of like tools, right? Tools to kind of like so that's the awesome thing, and that's why I wanted and it's having
it's proactive, and it's about improving performance, right? It's about setting the stage for your best performance, maybe even slipping into flow or being in the zone, right? But we can't force that. However, we can set the stage so that we consistently have our better performances.
The and I appreciate that, because it's things are clear, because even when I'm talking to some of my athletes, And some of them need problem solving, some need counseling, because some of these stuff or situations and concerns they have, it's not so much sports. It's not something that it's a fix. It's something that's so deep in the, it's a problem that needs to be solved.
Right.
So,
right. And
so
of course, it affects life and sport. Sport's part of life. Yeah.
And that it brings clarity to me. So I have to continue to read more so I get to understand it. When you're looking at this, I want to get into the next part. Sorry, you're supposed to.
Well, let me say one thing too, right? So we were talking about different credentials.
Yes.
You know, if somebody only has some of the credentials that I'm talking about, for instance, if they are a licensed clinical professional counselor or they are a licensed psychologist, right? Yeah. They can help with problems. Yes. If they are a CMPC, a certified mental performance consultant, right? And if they are that without having the licensure, then they can't necessarily help with the problems end of things, right? They're not there to help you address the life.
Yeah.
But they can help you directly with performance and performance only. So you got to pay attention to what somebody's credentials are, because it makes a difference what you can do with them.
Okay. That's now it makes perfect sense. The one thing is that with everything, and when you're going through these licenses, right, there's a you must have some direction. Yeah. Okay. Where am I going to practice? What it's going to look like? Do I build my own practice to be able to, my own little journey of what I'm looking at, right? How do you practice, and what is that whole how can I connect with you? Okay. First of all, where do you practice, and how do I connect with you if I'm looking to kind of be a part and having you to support me as growth?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm in Annapolis, Maryland. I'm in private practice. And these days I'm doing, I just got vaccinated, so I'm starting to see a few more clients in person, but I've been primarily doing, telehealth. And if you want to address problems, if you want counseling or psychotherapy, I mentioned the states where I'm licensed. If you want to do mental performance work, whether you're here or in Bermuda or wherever, we can do that. I don't necessarily need to be licensed for that. To reach out to me, my preference is to just shoot me an email first, tim@reachingahead.com. And then we can set up a time to either do a Zoom or a phone call and figure out if it's a good fit. And if it's not a good fit for whatever reason, I'm happy to help you find somebody who is a good fit, whether it's a professional in your region or somebody who has a specialty with something you're working on, whatever it is.
Listen, if you're watching, and I know there's some of you out there, right? And I know some of you out there that have been told or have been said, listen, go and, take a chance, go see somebody, go see a counselor, right? And don't do what I did. Don't sit back and try to solve all these problems yourself, because you bring on the stress. I was fortunate because I had one outlet I had, Tim, which was very interesting, that I had football. Soccer was my outlet. It's amazing because my mental state, I went through anxiety, and I didn't know how to function. But every time I always had that place to go back to. I talk about it a lot. I went back to the soccer field. So what I done, I put my own mindset. I closed off everything. I was able to really isolate what I was going through. But when I got to the soccer field, that was my goal. And I was so excited. Nice. When the game ended, all of a sudden I was back into that state. Yeah. And yes, if I would have went through and been able to, I think it was a presentation of the way people was telling me, right? It was back then, it was like, oh, you have a mental problem, something's wrong with you. It's game over. And that's where it struck me. So I'm actually speaking to, if we was to speak to some young people or even parents or somebody who's sitting there, how could you, let's say it was me, right? What would you say to me to help me guide this to know it's okay, right? Because this is going to touch on our next part too, okay? Because that's when we're actually going to have athletes. I'm going to have some people here. I wanted everybody to get to understand just like, how could you make me comfortable if I'm in that state? Because there's a lot going on right now with COVID, and how do you how could you get me to the door without promoting, but making me feel comfortable that it is okay?
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned COVID, right? Like that's taken a toll on everybody, and athletes in particular, are really missing that outlet right now. Like, imagine, David, if you were dealing with anxiety way back when, and all of a sudden that amazing outlet you had, where at least for a little while you could focus on nothing but sport. Imagine if that was ripped away from you. And for a lot of athletes, that's how it is right now, and sometimes, stuff from life, bleeds over into the field, and sometimes it doesn't. And what happens on the field, manages to really be that outlet where you're free of that stuff. I think regardless of however it looks for you personally, it's okay. As we're hearing a lot of elite athletes say these days, there's a lot of buzz phrases like, it's okay to not be okay. And everybody's got something going on, Yeah. I mean, they're not just buzz phrases, they're real. And, in terms of me personally, hopefully creating that safe space, where people can feel free to talk about anything. I mean, all I can say is that hopefully the person you're experiencing right now watching this is you get a sense of who I am. And I think the interaction, often isn't that different if we're doing a counseling or psychotherapy session or a mental performance session. I try to be authentic in all of my interactions. And in fact, while I'm human, and I'm sure I blow it sometimes with my own family, right? When I'm in my therapist or consultant role, I try to be cognizant of the fact, like, it's my job to be my best authentic self. And, one thing I often say to my clients is that, one of my goals is to make it safe enough in working with me that you can tell me, Tim, I think you're wonderful, or Tim, you are pissing me off, or wherever in between. And so we can talk about that. And so we can learn from it. And so we can use this relationship as a microcosm to understand what's happening in other relationships. And so start applying it to that, right? And so I've often found that, in working with me, people will have improved relationships with their parents, their siblings, their teammates, their coaches, and relationships are such a key ingredient to both mental health and performance.
Tim, do you find, but I got a couple more questions, but do you find getting yourself, because you must get emotionally and emotionally connected, right, to your clients?
Mm-hmm.
Do you get yourself in a space after is where you find yourself, okay, I need to breathe, and really have to do training on yourself, right? Because I found when I get connected to young people and from training, I get so emotionally connected to them.
Yeah.
I want them to succeed. It drains me. And I'm talking about the physical side.
Yeah.
The mental side, it's gotta be, how do you, and I don't know if it's called separating, but how are you able to, okay, I got my client, I'm working, I'm connected to this client. You see this client again over and over, and you're like, okay, we're growing. Is it emotional tasking to you sometimes where you're like, okay, I got to get a breather? Or is it just like a part of your love for having people to grow and empowering them that just takes over, so it doesn't become work anymore?
There's a lot there.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. No, all really good questions. So you use the word separating. It makes me think of the word boundaries, right?
Yes.
So I think, and at times I think it's even more challenging for a coach than somebody in my role. But regardless of the role, right, I think we need to be really conscious of good boundaries. Yes. And so, that means on the one hand, caring deeply, right, and being really tuned into people and their needs. And at the same time, being clear with ourselves and communicating what is an appropriate boundary, and it doesn't always feel good, as the athlete or as the coach or the therapist or consultant, to have those boundaries, and yet it makes it way less messy. Oftentimes when people come to work with me, they've got enough messiness happening in their family life or their personal life or their work life, right? And so to have a relationship where it doesn't feel messy at all, right? Where even if I'm disappointing them sometimes because I'm not available 24/7, for instance, they appreciate the fact that it's not messy with me. It's the boundaries are what they should be. And I think, part of what you're talking about too, David, with being so invested with your athletes, I think we can sometimes have better boundaries when we're tracking two things, right? One, what are, just like we want our athletes to do, we want to be aware of what are the controllables and uncontrollables.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I can control my end of the dynamic. Ultimately what you do as an athlete, I might not like all of your decisions, but I don't have any control over what you're doing, and likewise, right? Like, sure, there might be times where I'm really invested in hopefully seeing an athlete make, some given changes. And it seems clear as day that that's where they need to go. And yet there needs to be readiness at their end. And sometimes that just takes time, and I can keep asking the right questions, and still it's got to happen on their timetable.
It's got to have, right. And they got to be patient, right? Because like we said, and they got to want to change. They got to want to have a mindset of change, right? Because they can coming to you is one thing, but if you have to be open for change, and change is not easy. Change can take, it's time. It's really time, because you can fall right back and be like, okay. And it's that patience with that person.
Yeah. And I'll say one more thing in terms of self-care for somebody like me or somebody like you. I think making sure that we have our colleagues or our own therapists, people that we're checking in with when we're having those strong reactions, that helps us maintain some objectivity and still, keeps us from burning out while still having warmth.
Yeah. So it's nothing wrong with a counselor, seeing a counselor, right? Because it's that support, right? There's nothing wrong with that, and that's okay. That is okay, right? They the one thing, and it's just being into this game for so long and a part of sports. And yes, what is the does the mental training lead into sports performance, right? How does mental training lead into sports performance? Because I mentioned it when I talked about the zone. And I don't know if I just feel when I'm in the zone, and when I was in the zone, I was playing, nobody can touch me.
Right.
And it was only after a while I said, hold up, we call it the zone, but it's almost in preparation. I was preparing myself mentally. I set goals. How does it lead? How does the mental training, lead into, sports performance?
So first off, let's talk about the zone, right? Which is what the media calls it.
Yeah.
Researchers call it flow. There's a researcher who coined the phrase in the first place, who coined the term. It's a mouthful. His name is Csikszentmihalyi. Don't even ask me how to spell it.
I was gonna ask you that too, right? Just to put you on the spot.
I could try. I might get it right. In any case, Csikszentmihalyi talked about flow in all different kinds of settings, right? You can experience flow on the soccer field. You can experience it, as a surgeon. You can experience it. Gosh, I read a study at one point that looked at Japanese motorcycle gangs. I mean, you name it, in different contexts. Like, we can be so immersed in what we're doing, as you were saying, right? Like, you feel invincible in those moments. Challenge level and your skill level feel like a match. Maybe it's a stretch for your skills, but it's just within reach. And man, it's euphoric when we experience it. And it can feel in the moment like things are happening in slow motion, but then after it can feel like it went by like that. Now, experiencing flow it's a rare experience, actually. I would guess that, maybe we experience it 10% of the time, or probably far less, maybe even 1% of the time. And yet it's those flow experiences that keep us coming back to football or soccer, right? And they're kind of addictive, and in a good way. And so mental training helps clear the barriers to our best performances, right?
Yeah.
And so skills, I often work with people on. There's a menu of 12 skills I focus on, and just to rattle off a few, right? There's smart goal setting. There's self-talk habits. There's mindful attention. There's mental imagery. There's anxiety tolerance, anxiety reduction, communication, right? That's just a handful of the skills. When we're doing those things, if we're doing them consistently, if we're weaving them into our training, if we're turning them into habits, our best, or at least our, pretty close to best performances come along. And while it certainly doesn't guarantee that we're going to fall into flow, because you can't guarantee it, it doesn't work that way. You fall into it, right? It sets the stage where it makes flow a little bit more likely.
You know what? It's interesting. I was listening to a guy. This one guy. I don't know. It's way back. It's 93, 94. I was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, playing. And the guy said, "Listen, I can get you in the zone. I can get you in the zone."
Snake oil.
Yes. And you're like, okay, yeah, I want to be in that zone, right? It's such a I can get you there. Didn't know. I'm like, yeah, give me some tools to get me into the zone, because I'm in a slump right now. I need a zone right now. So it's kind of like you're saying, you fall into it, right? It's a whole. What is and who knows, whatever that person was offering, right? I mean, it might not have been all snake oil, right? Maybe they were offering some skills that allowed people to fall into it more often, but there is nothing that can directly just put somebody in the zone or flow. It doesn't work that way. Well, it didn't work. It didn't. I'm not going to tell you what I had to do. What didn't work for me. Doctor, in this world, right, when everybody's looking for instant results, instant outcomes, the fast food, I want it now. Right? Realistically, when change is happening with the mental shift, what's a realistic, expectation when we're looking for change? For instance, let's say as a professional athlete, let's say, oh, you got to go see a sports psychologist because I'm having these, I need some tools to engage. I come to you on Monday, I have a game on the following Saturday, right? Instant mindset, because this is this norm, this culture, right? I'm assuming that, I'm going to be fixed. What's a realistic journey or outcome or direction like that I should be expecting? My expectations.
So it's funny you bring that up. I mean, I occasionally, just the other week, I have people reach out who are like, yeah, I have this big race this weekend or this big event. Like, yeah, okay, let's go. Get me set for this weekend. And, that always sends off mild alarm bells, right? Because I don't want to sell snake oil. I don't want to make false promises.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think of the ski racer I was working with the other week, right? I mean, he had his best performance yet that weekend. Now, I don't want to sell a false bill of goods. I don't want to say that's common, but I wouldn't say that it's uncommon for somebody to have some little breakthroughs early on, but to have those like long-term consistent breakthroughs, it requires ongoing work for a while. The quickest, the closest things I have to magic bullets or silver bullets, whatever, is to say, focus on three things, right? One, sleep, right? For some reason in our culture, I think particularly military and athletics, although it's shifting a little bit, we think sleep is optional. It's not. It's like food, it's like water, and yet, just like we can optimize performance on the field by having, good, nutritious food, and we can have enough water, right? Well, we can optimize performance with getting enough sleep, and that typically means 8 to 9 hours, if not more. And, then breathing has a huge impact. I'm often working with people on a breathing routine. So 2 times 20 minutes a day is optimal for 10 weeks. I mean, that's what the research protocols have people doing. It's a huge commitment. But when people do it, I often see breakthroughs. And sometimes I see, like with my ski racer the other week, some little breakthroughs in the short run, right?
Yeah.
And to do that, there's apps I could recommend to help with the pacing. But for starters, you want to do 4 seconds on your inhale, 6 seconds on your exhale, right? And you do that for 20-minute sessions 2 times a day. And then, with the fancy equipment, I can help you identify what your optimal breathing rate is.
Well, okay.
Where you're maximizing your heart rate variability and essentially, to simplify it, right? The part of your body, your psychophysiology that amps you up and the part that chills you out, they're kind of working in congruence.
Okay.
When we breathe at our optimal pace, which for most people is around 6 breaths per minute, good things can happen from there. And then I'm often working with people on the mind-body ABCs, and that's a skill that takes some time, right? But really starting to recognize, not just the activating event, the A, but the B's, picture the bubble above your head if you're in the funnies or the comics, right? Like what words or pictures would go into that B in that moment. And then the C's, right? Connected to that, the consequences, which we're talking about in terms of mood, the experience in the body, and behavior. That skill in particular usually takes a bit of time before it really starts to click for people. It's essentially structured mindfulness.
Right, but we are here, and I'm excited. Just if you got on late and you're just catching the end, we're talking to Dr. Tim, Herzog, and we're just coming to the end. What I'm really hearing from you, and it's crazy because it's the mental training is actually, it is, right? You can make it a part of your daily routine. It's a training process. Just hearing you saying, just taking those deep breaths, and some of us do it. Some of us do take it because that's what we go. Okay, let me just breathe now.
Right.
But it's continuous and it's different low exercises and that.
And I might comment on that in a minute if there's time.
Yes, there's time.
Okay.
So it's kind of interesting because just a daily routine, and a routine is that when somebody says this, Bascome, just breathe. Okay, but I'm breathing, but I don't know how I'm supposed to breathe. You tell me breathe. You mean you tell me just to be quiet and don't say nothing and let me gather my thoughts, right? So, but people think they can shut it on and off. Sometimes I think I can, but it's all about the mental training. It's all about understanding, right? What you're doing so that it can become a routine. And really people like me, it will help me because I'm so busy. I'm so tired, and I do get stressed and I hold it all in. And I may release it in areas which I shouldn't, right? It's kind of like and that's what I'm learning here. So I may have to be calling you up, but I'll let you go ahead and just kind of, chat a little bit on that when I'm told to breathe,
Yeah. So a couple thoughts. One, you said, take a deep breath,
yes,
right? Which is commonly how people phrase it, coaches, parents, whomever else. And what athletes end up doing, they go, so they take a deep breath into their chest and then they hold it, right? And yet, I would like to start the campaign to say, have a nice long exhale, right? Because it's the nice long exhale, right?
Yeah, calm, right?
Allows our heart rate to then follow, right? When we're breathing rhythmically, right? Where we have like around a 4-second inhale and then a 6-second exhale, which is much longer than most people are used to. Our heart rate, actually, if you're monitoring both at the same time, you see that our heart rate follows. And so our heart rate ends up, there's a big difference between the peak and the valley, but the valleys get deeper.
Right.
And when we do that, people tend to feel much more calm mentally and at the same time physically alert.
Well,
yeah. So I could go on about a lot of.
No, you got
Yeah.
because that's what I do. I'm telling you, that's what I do. I take a deep breath. You didn't tell me when to breathe again. You didn't tell me, and I'm
Right.
trying
Yeah.
to.
No, say have a nice long exhale. Oh, this is the other thing I wanted to add on that real quick too. Right. We can approach breathing in two ways. Right. We can, to an extent, especially if we've practiced it, as we've been suggesting. Right. We can use breathing as the Band-Aid in the moment when the stressor comes along. Right. And so anxiety is maybe taking off, and we can rein it in and get it to go down sooner or for longer by exercising our good breathing. But by proactively doing your breathing exercise, your nice long exhales, ideally with a pacer, right? If you're doing that, your 20 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever you commit to, ideally 20 minutes, 2 times a day, then you manage to bring down your baseline level of anxiety. I can share with you a simple graph if you want. But if you picture, right, if you're walking around in the world with this baseline level of stress or anxiety, right, and then a stressor comes along, and so now it goes up that much more, right?
Yeah.
And then the stress or anxiety lingers for a little while. Maybe it keeps escalating a little bit, and then eventually it comes down. By doing the proactive breathing exercise that I'm talking about, you manage to lower the baseline. And so you're starting from a lower place to begin with. Right?
Okay.
Now the stressor comes along, that delta, the amount that it goes up, isn't as much, and you're starting from a lower place anyways, right? And then, it doesn't linger as long, and then we can use it as the Band-Aid in the moment and bring it down sooner, right? And so it's a different mindset in how to approach this stuff.
Well, let me tell you how I've been approaching my anxiety, doctor. I give myself more work. That's what I do. I'm never still. I just gave myself, and because I never seeked counseling or support, so I was young at 15, I was suffering from anxiety up to today. So what I done, I ended up going to hospital in one of my pro games up in Harrisburg, and I thought, oh man, what's going on with me? I was going through this anxiety, and then when the season always ended is when I struggled. So what I done, I had a whole full plate, and there's many people out there that do it, right? The high anxiety, they're moving, they got to move because I can't let my mind settle. And I function that way, and I've been functioning well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's constructive to an extent, but right. I imagine, then it probably starts to interfere with sleep, and and then you haven't slept well, and so maybe you're grumpy and more anxious the next day. Yeah.
That's just it, right? And it's not a good space to be in because a lot of people do it, right? I've been able to be doing this my life, and it's not comfortable sometimes because I'm looking for stuff to do, and I'm just kind of moving. And I really wish I would have had this understanding when it's coming to the understanding of the mental training, understanding what this does for you. So I
want to point out one thing too. Mental training will not make you soft, right? You can be driven, right? You can put in the extra effort that nobody else is putting in, and you can learn how to balance that so that you're consistently bringing your best self to the table rather than burning out and then going in spurts.
Now, I appreciate everything. And well, as everybody I told you, and I tell you, the information that we're getting, this is why we have to have a part 2. Now, first of all, Doctor, greatly appreciate your time. Greatly appreciate your time. And it's our next on part 2. And this is where it's really going to hit him because I'm going to have some athletes. I'm also going to share and be able to share because there's nothing better for people understanding when the people in the video, in the, around the table have experiences and that can help them move. So I'm excited about it. So our next, we're going to have, some athletes in and myself, we're going to be actually now going through, right? What's some things, what does that look like? Going through a young person for injury, going through an injury, what does it look like after trying to battle themselves? Then going to that professional level, like a professional athlete, knowing you're getting paid this money and you want to be at a high level, but then you're getting older, right? Mm-hmm. And what happens, doctor, is that you tend to find ways to cheat. You got to be mentally strong enough to understand what that looks like. So let's see, that's because that's going to be really some hot conversation areas, and really and I'm gonna share some controversial when it's coming to athletes and got into making that decision and not having enough self-discipline to do things they shouldn't, knowing it's going to affect them. That's always a mindset. It's continued a mindset and that's what I've realized, that some of my players like, no, I need to be on top. And this is what's going to get me there. If it's steroids or whichever, they make those conscious decisions. And I want to kind of, so I am going to have that and ask a few questions around that, because it's so powerful when, as a fan, they see us at a high level. And with 21, then they see us again at 35. How do I stay at that high level is where my mental state will be. And then the other question, when is it time mentally that you're going to have to commit? So I got to retire.
Right.
You know,
that is a hard transition for folks, or at least it can be.
Yeah, and that's a mental thing.
In fact, I've been working with a group just recently on a new study that's about to be launched, the athlete transition study. Actually, the website just went live. You know, and we would love for retirees to participate. But we're very much diving into that question, right? Like, what are some factors that can best help you adapt as you face that big transition?
Big transition, because I'm going to have, and it's going to help my players out as well. But greatly appreciate it. Greatly appreciate it. And I must say thank you to Jana. Jana's pulled us all, MedStar Health. You've done a great job. You know, Jana likes to be behind the scenes. So, you know, she's probably smiling back. She sees us, right? I'm just going to leave her alone. But thank you very much. Thanks to MedStar Health, you know, and I know you guys are working well together. I can let you know that you will be getting some service from me. All right. And
excellent. I look forward to working with y'all.
And definitely making sure. So thank you very much, and greatly, greatly appreciate your time.
Thank you.